Locomotive power was beginning to sweep the country in the 1860s. An innovative Chicago businessman named George Pullman devised a way to bring ultimate travel experiences to white Americans: luxury travel, first-class services, and onboard, comfortable sleeping accommodations. In 1859, as the railroads were expanding their reach across America, Pullman convinced the Alton and St. Louis Railroad to allow him to convert two old passenger cars into luxury sleeper cars. They were an instant hit. Wealthy travelers finally had amenities that they expected, and the new middle-class travelers got a glimpse of the way the better classes traveled. Service also had to be above standard. What better source than former slaves already sporting subservient attitudes and a smiling desire to please? He was dressed to look like the ultimate servant. Pullman's first cars were finished in 1864, and around 1867, after the end of slavery, Pullman recruited black men from the South to work as porters. They would carry baggage, shine shoes, set up and clean the sleeping berths, and answer to the needs of passengers. They were later required to be waiters, valets, and entertainers of sort. George Pullman was an interesting man. Born in 1831 in New York, he became a wealthy engineer and industrialist. In the era of robber baron businessmen, Pullman fit right in. In 1867, he introduced his first hotel on wheels, the President, a sleeper with an attached kitchen and dining car, as he recruited porters. In 1869, Pullman bought out the Detroit Car and Manufacturing Company and began manufacturing rail cars. He bought their patents. By 1875, the Pullman firm owned $100,000 worth of patents and had 700 cars in operation. In 1880, Pullman bought 4,000 acres in South Chicago and built a company manufacturing town with the new state-of-the-art Palace Car Company, employee housing, shopping areas, churches, theaters, parks, a hotel and library. There were 1,300 structures to accommodate every need, but life was not always happy in the all-white town of Pullman. Employees were regulated at home and at work by Pullman's stringent standards. Much was demanded of them. They had to pay rent for housing, even when wages did not cover the expenses of caring for their family. Pullman turned a deaf ear to their complaints. During the financial crisis of 1894, manufacturing demands increased as Pullman cut wages 30%, required them to work long hours, and did not lower rents. The Pullman strike of 1894 went to the Supreme Court of Illinois, and Pullman was ordered to divest itself of the town. A better life is sometimes associated with the Pullman Porter story. Working as a Pullman porter became a coveted job, even a career that found entire families, brothers, sons, and grandsons following in the lifestyle of the porters. It was clean work. They were paid more than what many other black workers made at the time. It was tough but not backbreaking, like field labor. Porters worked a job that took them around the country, which was not available to most blacks at the time. They may have called him George for George Pullman's boys, may have had to work 400 hours a month with little time off. He may have slept little because day and night he was on call. Pullman charged him for his sleeping place, meals, replacement of sheets and towels, his uniforms, and he had to buy his own shoe polish. But he made up for this in getting tips to augment his wages, smiling across the miles. The work life: uniformed, polite, and immaculate. He carried the luggage and helped women board and disembark the trains. Shoes were placed outside the sleeping cabins at night. The porter would collect them, groom them, and replace them for the next day's use. Every bed had a military standard, neat and fresh. If during the night a service was requested, a bell would summon their porter. The food and beverages were as classy as the service and accommodations. Men and women provided preparation and food delivery. Lounges were often available for informal entertainment. Dining and accommodating services were always available to make meals and leisure pleasurable. Be they small chambers or larger dining facilities, the service was always above reproach. The porter was there for every need, for every passenger. Sometimes he was privy to special engagements. He was there from first entry to exit, available to address every need. Pullman maids were added to the staff to acknowledge the service needs of women and their families. Maids primarily serviced sleeping accommodations for women, attended to their nighttime toilette, and their bedtime needs. During the day hours, they provided free nail manicures or hair care services. Travel with children was made easier with an onboard attendant, allowing parents more leisure time to travel. Whatever the personal needs women demanded, Pullman maids were as vigilant as porters in addressing them, including repairing clothing and shining shoes. There were also the occasional female porter. The Pullman crew tended to work together for years, serving on the same routes. Over time, additional services required new crew members. What was always consistent was that the captain was white. Respectable was the reputation of the Pullman porter. Over the course of the Pullman employment era, until closing in 1968, the company employed over 200 maids and over 10,000 male workers. Part of their hiring requirement was a presentation standard. Porters had to be in good physical condition and attractive. He had to carry himself in a respectable, non-threatening, and professional way. Be well read. This carried over at home. In the community, Pullman men were solid middle-class family men, active in community and church as a rule. They were brothers. Spending so many hours together created bonds on the job and at home. The brotherhood stood for more than the union membership. It was a life bond that cemented families and grew middle-class upward mobility for Black Americans. They had fun together. They supported each other because only the porters understood the personal costs of this job. They stood for something. They knew how to have fun and enjoy the lifestyle they earned. As early as 1900, the first efforts to organize Pullman Porters into a union were crushed by the Pullman Company. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, BSCP, was established as the first labor organization led by African Americans to receive a charter in the American Federation of Labor, AFL. In the early days, the Porters Athletic Association, located in New York City, invited A. Philip Randolph to help them create a genuine labor union. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters were launched on August 25th, 1925. Key to their success was to galvanize national membership in three of the largest terminals: Chicago, Oakland, and St. Louis. There was much work to do. Prominent union activists, men and women, were fired for their involvement. Therefore, secret meetings were held. National white labor unions only played lip service regarding activities across racial lines. Racism separated them. The Chicago division of the Brotherhood was established, and efforts to negotiate with the Pullman Company met with rejection. The Brotherhood rallied support within the Black community, organizations, ministers, and African American newspapers. They organized the Pullman Porters and Maids Protective Association. While organizing roughly half of the porters within the company, the union was seemingly no closer to obtaining recognition than it had been in 1925. By 1928, BSCP leaders decided that the only way to force the issue was to strike. Leadership was divided. They secretly met with the Pullman Company. Pullman refused to follow the precedent with Black workers set forth with white railroad workers. Although the union had voted for a strike, the Pullman Company convinced them that they did not have the strength in numbers or resources to pull it off. In July 1928, Randolph called off the strike just hours before it was scheduled to begin. Negotiations for increased labor standards with the Pullman Company began, but were repeatedly deadlocked. The BSCP requested the assistance of the National Mediation Board in 1937. On August 25th, 1937, a contract was signed between the BSCP and the Pullman Company, going into effect in October 1937. This raised the wages of porters and maids, established a basic 240-hour month, and provided time and a half overtime pay after 260 hours. Pullman claimed the wage increases would cost the company approximately $1.5 million per year. The company also agreed to pay for uniforms of porters after they'd been employed for 10 years. Women in the movement. The BSCP was founded for all Pullman attendants, including maids. Many of the maids were well-educated Black and Chinese American women. 6 weeks after the foundation of the BSCP, female Pullman employees and relatives of male union members formed the Women's Economic Councils, officially recognized as the International Ladies Auxiliary to the BSCP in 1938. This adjunct organization focused on fundraising and disseminating pro-union information to the general public. Powerful women's organizations, including the National Council of Negro women were active supporters. Celebrating these fine Americans' contributions. Visit the A. Philip Randolph Pullman Porter Museum in the historic Pullman district of Chicago, Illinois. It was founded in 1995 by Dr. Lynn Hughes.
All aboard!